This is my exhibition that is titled Over the Slopes of Speech, and the name comes from the Palestinian poet Mahmoud Darwish. I titled the show with the quote from his poem because it aligns with the main idea of this exhibition. It started 2 years ago, way back in the United States, where I actually based now. It started with my interviews with women who immigrated to the US. I asked them how did they start feeling that they actually live in history, that their personal lives somehow connected to the bigger picture, to the big historical and political events that they feel they're part of. I started doing it because I decided to stay in the United States by myself. And then when we discussed this project with NIKA, we decided that I can continue it here because the United States is the country of immigrants, and actually Arab Emirates is also a country of immigrants. So I decided that I can actually extend my project over the continents, and we can show two parts together, my American part and my Emirate part, and we can pair them up. I was introduced to the interview technique a while ago when I was a student at the philosophy department at the Moscow State University. I was part of the research group and we interviewed many philosophers back then. And I understood that it's really a map of somebody's mind, because when we interviewed somebody, people created a real map with different cards of the philosophy world back then. So I decided maybe I also can try it for my artistic practice, because I love people and I feel that interview also give me a real connection with the person, that it's not just a superficial hey, how are you, but it's a deep conversation. And sometimes I can have these conversations with people whom I actually never have a chance to talk to in real life. And sometimes we don't see each other anymore, but these conversations really stay with me, they really affect me, and that's how I actually can connect with the world, see the world around me and understand it deeply. I was curious how other women adjusted to their immigration experience. I started just asking around different people, do they know somebody who can share their story and who can actually talk to me. And then I interviewed very different people who immigrated from Mexico, from Egypt, from Kazakhstan, with a very diverse backgrounds. I decided that I will convert these interviews into a huge watercolor triptychs, and I will process these conversations into visual form. The work that you can see on the show, it's a visual response to this conversation. It's not a direct journalism, but it's really a processed experience that I have with people whom I interview. With some of them I actually became friends, and honestly it's a very good way to find new friends too. The first piece that we can see here is dedicated to my conversation with Gulbana, who immigrated to the US from Kazakhstan. We talked about her life and her process of adjusting to the new country. For me, it was a very deep and profound conversation. After that, we became real friends. Another work that I have here in the show is titled To Anda. This work is based on my interview with Anda, who lived in 8 countries. She actually speaks 8 languages. That is amazing. And with her we discussed how different she feels when she speaks these various languages, because every language somehow affects her own personality. For example, when she speaks German, she's more strict, and when she speaks Russian, she's more soft. This was a very interesting conversation about how many different persona can we have when we speak languages from different countries. Another work that we have here is called To Sarah, that is based on my interview with Sarah, who immigrated to the United States from Egypt. And I asked her this question: what is the image of being an immigrant for you personally? And she gave me a very beautiful response. I imagine it is like walking a tightrope. If you look down at your feet, you will lose your balance. If you are not looking at your feet, you are fine. The moment that you do is the moment when you become aware, and uncertainty creeps in and you might trip and fall. Another work that I have here is titled To Christina. This is one of my favorite works personally. It's dedicated to the famous Mexican writer Cristina Rivera Garza. First, I read her books and then I had an interview with her. When we discussed what is home for her, she gave me a very interesting response that home for her is actually the place that defines by distance, because she lived in different countries. She lived in Mexico, in the US and in Europe. And when she lives in one country, she always wants to move to the country where she previously lived. She always had this idealized image of home that she had in another place. What was very amazing with this interview is her response that home defines from the distance, and it's not a place that is fixed, but this is the place that is always changing while you're moving throughout the planet, as Christina does. Here in the Arab Emirates, I continued this project. I interview women who immigrated here, also from very different countries, from Ghana, from Nigeria, from Ukraine, from Kuwait, from Russia, from Turkmenistan. Also, I invite some of my interviews to the shadow portrait sessions. How does it happen? I invite them here to the studio. I fix the piece of paper on the wall. I put a light bulb, so the light is projected to the wall and their shadow is very clear. And then I trace their shadow with a pencil, and then I put this work on the floor and I start my watercolor process. Sometimes I create the interview before or sometimes during the painting session itself. I really enjoy my watercolor technique because it gives me a lot of freedom, and sometimes it's very unpredictable. So I'm very curious to get back to the studio next day and see how it dries, because it takes a couple days to dry. Of course, I can predict some parts of it, but some parts are not very predictable because it depends how the color will stay on the paper, and it depends how it actually overlap, and mix. I feel it really fits the concept because conversations that I have, they're also sometimes navigated by the questions that I asked, but on the other hand, there are so many unpredictable things that I hear, and sometimes people open up themselves in a way that I could never expect. Actually, I discovered this technique by chance. It was, I think, 10 years ago. I stayed in my friend's house. They had a huge studio there. I decided to try different types of watercolors because I had my academic painting background and I did watercolors before, but I was curious, can I extend it to a larger format? I really enjoy the large scale because you can move your body. It's like dancing. It really correlates to your movement and to your body, because when you create a small work, it's more connected to your vision and to your hand. But when it's a large work, it's a full body experience. That's what I enjoy. So how I discovered this particular technique? I poured some water on this paper and then I put some color inside. And then I fell asleep because I was very, very tired. I worked all the day long before that. And then when I woke up, I saw that the watercolor itself created this very interesting pattern. I was curious, how can I extend these patterns and actually work with it more? If I didn't fall asleep and if I didn't wait for a long time, I would never discover it. It was really by a chance.